Welcome to Daily Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into something that is quite literally at the heart of Indian democracy, your fundamental rights. And look, these aren't just some vague philosophical ideas. We're talking about concrete, legally backed guarantees that are written right into the Constitution. Just listen to these words from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the main architect of the Indian Constitution. He said that without one specific article, the entire Constitution would be a nullity, basically worthless. He called it the very soul and the very heart of the whole thing. So, what on earth was he talking about? What's this one single provision that breathes life into all of your other freedoms? Well, let's dive in and unpack the ultimate legal framework that's designed to protect you. First things first, we've got to start with the foundation. Part 3 of the Constitution is often called India's Magna Carta, and that's a direct nod to that famous English Charter of Rights from way back in 1215. It's not just a fancy title. It really shows you just how important these rights are in India's legal system. So, what are they really? Well, fundamental rights are this whole set of rights you'll find in Part 3 of the Constitution, running from Article 12 all the way to 35. Now, the framers definitely took some inspiration from the U.S. Bill of Rights, but there's one key word here you absolutely have to remember: justiciable. And all that means is that if someone violates these rights, you can actually go to court and get them enforced. That's a game changer. And what's their main job? Simple. They're here to support a political democracy. Think of them as a shield, a shield that protects your personal freedoms from the state getting too powerful. The whole point is to have a government of laws, not of men, which is a way of saying it prevents any one person or group from having absolute, unchecked power. Okay, before we actually tour the rights themselves, we need to understand the rules of the game. How do they actually work? What makes them tick? Let's take a look at the blueprint. So here are the core features. We already covered that they're justiciable. You can take your case to court. And guess who guarantees that? The Supreme Court itself. It's your ultimate defender. Now, they aren't totally set in stone. Parliament can change them. But, and this is a huge but, they can't mess with the basic structure of the Constitution. The core ideas of democracy and liberty have to stay. And finally, they can be suspended during a national emergency, but even then, your right to life and personal liberty are protected. Now, this brings up a really important point. Are your rights unlimited? Can you do literally anything you want? The answer is no. India doesn't have absolute rights. Instead, we have what are called qualified rights. This just means the state can put reasonable restrictions on them. It's all about finding that tricky balance between your individual freedom and what's good for society as a whole. All right, time for the main event. Let's take a quick tour of the 6 pillars that hold up your liberty. These are the big categories right at the heart of Part 3 of the Constitution. Here's a little bit of trivia for you. The Constitution actually started with 7 fundamental rights. But the right to property? Well, it got moved. The 44th Amendment Act in 1978 took it off this special list. So today, that leaves us with 6. And here they are in a nutshell. You've got the right to equality, the right to freedom, that's where you find freedom of speech, and the right against exploitation, which outlaws things like forced labor. Then there's the right to freedom of religion, and of course, cultural and educational rights. But I want you to really focus on that last one, the right to constitutional remedies, because that one, that's the key that unlocks everything else. And that brings us to the ultimate safeguard. It's great to have rights written down, but what good are they if you can't actually enforce them? This is where your constitutional shield comes into play. And here's where it all comes full circle. Remember that quote from Dr. Ambedkar? This is what he was talking about. Article 32. The real genius of the Constitution is that the right to protect your rights is itself a fundamental right. How cool is that? It's what makes all the other rights mean something. It's the enforcement mechanism, and that's why it's the heart and soul. So how exactly does a court enforce them? They use a super powerful legal tool called a writ. A writ is basically a formal written order from the Supreme Court or High Court that can force someone to do something or stop them from doing something, all to protect your rights. And this is your legal toolkit. There are 5 types of writs you should know about. Habeas corpus literally means to have the body, and it protects you from being locked up illegally. Mandamus, we command, can order a public official to actually do their job. Then you've got prohibition and certiorari, which are used to keep lower courts in line. And finally, quo warranto, or by what authority, which is used to challenge if someone legally holds a public office. These are serious tools for every citizen. But it is really important to remember that these rights aren't an unbreakable promise. We already talked about reasonable restrictions, but the list of rights itself can actually be changed over time. And the perfect example of this is the journey of the right to property. It started out in 1950 as a fundamental right under Article 31, but after a ton of debate, the 44th Amendment Act in 1978 took it off the list. Now, it still exists as a legal right under Article 300A, but it's no longer a fundamental right. And that just goes to show you, the Constitution is a living, breathing document. Which brings us to a final pretty big question. Should we look at these rights as a finished document, something set in stone forever? Or are they more like a living promise, something that needs to adapt and evolve as our society changes? It's definitely something to think about. So, there you have it. From India's Magna Carta to the powerful legal writs that give you the tools to enforce your freedom, understanding these rights is so important. If you found this explainer useful, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Daily Deep Dive channel. Thanks for watching.